Hello and welcome to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about 2012's Resident Evil Retribution, the fifth film in the Resident Evil franchise. And in this entry, heroine Alice is attacked and captured by the forces of the malevolent Umbrella Corporation, then brought to a secret underwater facility where the company uses clones of their employees, including clones of Alice herself, as the victims in simulated zombie outbreaks. We see one such Alice clone get killed, though she does manage to safely hide her clone daughter first. However, when the power briefly goes out in the facility, the real Alice escapes and finds herself in a simulated Tokyo. As she fights her way past hordes of zombies, she discovers that the power behind Umbrella has changed, and former adversary Albert Wesker is behind her opportunity to escape. Wesker has also dispatched a rescue team, but Alice will need to make her way through the facility, which is still crawling with hundreds of zombies, as well as many of Umbrella's far nastier creations, to meet up with them. Now, her enemies won't be standing idly by, of course. They also have their own agents in play, and Alice will need to stay one step ahead of them, a task that becomes much more complicated when she stumbles across her clone daughter and feels compelled to try and save the young girl as well. So I saw Resident Evil Retribution at the cinemas back in 2012, and at the time I thought it was silly but reasonably fun. And then since I already owned the first four films on DVD, I later picked up this one as well, and watched it and basically had both impressions reinforced. It was probably actually more enjoyable the second time I saw it. This is not a film with a particularly coherent or sensible plot, but if you go in knowing and accepting that, it's pretty easy to just sit back and enjoy the action spectacle. So I'm not going to try and answer the question of whether or not you should see this movie. It's the fifth film in a franchise. I figure you already know whether or not you're likely to be a fan, because either you've had no interest in the franchise or you've watched the other four. But I do think that this film does some things that are worth talking about. So first of all, the start of the film is very silly. Some context, the previous Resident Evil film ended with enemies swarming to attack the heroes. Retribution begins at the conclusion of that attack, then goes backward through the fight in slow motion. We're then treated to the story so far monologue from Milla Jovovich, before we see the action sequence again, but forwards and in normal speed this time. Which, as ways to start a movie go, is certainly one of the things you could choose to do. Now, I'm not 100% sure what the thought process was behind this decision. It's very easy to kind of make a cynical answer of, well, it's a cheap way to pad the runtime by a few minutes, but I don't feel like the runtime was so short that it needs the padding. I think the most likely explanation is that they just thought it would be a neat way to do the opening credits. Certainly all of the slow motion backwards footage plays under the listing of the cast and the senior crew. So I think, it's just an attempt to do a kind of different title sequence. But it's certainly, when I was watching it in the cinema, I was going, okay, this is happening. This is a thing. The second thing that I think is interesting about this film is how it reuses characters from earlier entries. Claire Redfield, who had a significant role in the third or fourth films, is absent from Retribution. Presumably there was a scheduling issue with Ali Larter, who portrays the role. But the film is otherwise packed with familiar faces from the franchise, extending all the way back to the original 2002 film, with Colin Salmon and Michelle Rodriguez both making their return to the Resident Evil screen universe. In-universe, this is made possible by the facility full of clones conceit. And in fact, the fact that they are clones allows Rodriguez, who gets second billing behind Jovovich, to play two different clones of her original character, one good and one evil. Also returning are Oded Fair as Carlos Oliveira from Apocalypse and Extinction, Boris Kodjo as Luther West from Afterlife, and Sienna Gillery as Jill Valentine. Now, you may, or you may not, recall that I considered Gillery's performance a significant weakness in Resident Evil Apocalypse, the second film in the franchise, and alas, I don't think she's any better suited to the role here than she was originally. Given the character's drastic change in look in the intervening years, I would personally have taken the opportunity to recast. She's practically unrecognisable as the same actor, so it's not like keeping the same person improved continuity. That quibble aside, though, I found it a lot of fun to see how they use the returning faces in this movie. I'm not sure whether the cloning element of the script was used as an excuse to bring back people, as in they started with wanting to bring back people and came up with a reason for it, or if they had the cloning element first and then realised that it would let them bring a whole bunch of people back. Either way, I think it's a fun element to the film for people who've been a fan of the franchise. And let's face it, if you're watching the fifth film, you're probably a fan of the franchise. And then I think we need to call it out. There's a debt to aliens here. I mean, a major subplot in this film involves Alice meeting her clone's daughter, Becky, and forming a strong maternal bond with the girl as they dodge zombies. Later on, Becky gets nabbed by a particularly nasty kind of enemy, and Alice risks her own escape to go back for a one-on-one battle to rescue her surrogate child. I think that, the strong parallels to the mother-daughter relationship that develops between Ripley and Newt in Aliens are pretty obvious. It's not subtle, but then this is not a subtle movie. I think the important thing is that, as with Ripley and Newt, the Alice-Becky relationship feels pretty convincing on screen. Jovovich and her young co-star Ariana Engineer, mesh well together. So ultimately, I had pretty good fun with Resident Evil Retribution, and I think it's also worth noting that this is the fifth film in a female-led action franchise, and also a movie in which both the top two credited stars are women. For all that the parts of the script that aren't cribbed from Aliens are mostly just loose justifications for a series of action set pieces, it's pretty cool that we have this female-led action franchise that has extended for over a decade. So that's Resident Evil Retribution. Next time, we're going to stay in 2012 for the ultra-low-budget Australian science fiction offering The 25th Reich. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.